What's up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I'm the RJB0. Welcome to GalacticGod's channel. I first want to give you a huge thank you to GalacticGod for allowing me to post here for your viewing pleasure. Today, once again, I'm the RJB0. I run a discussion show I call Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual, named for obvious reasons. And today, I want to specifically talk to y'all about making meta calls. Now, meta calls are an important way of innovating your deck, especially if you're running a rogue deck, in order to have a creative way of taking down the top tier. Now, they're especially important in faster formats like the ones that we are going into right now, post-Primal Origins, so I figure it is appropriate for me to talk to you guys about that today. I'm first going to talk about what is a meta call, and I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons of running larger meta calls over smaller ones in certain formats, and finally I'm going to talk about how you can make your meta calls the most effective that they can possibly be. So before I can actually discuss what a meta call does, I should probably get on the same page as you guys as to what a meta call is. I generally define a meta call as a modification that you make to a deck that specifically takes down a dominant strategy in the meta. Now, this can be anything from as small as the rotation that we make, like on a format by format basis between Effect Veiler, Maxi, and Fiendish Chain, to something as large as creating an entire anti-meta deck that takes down a particular top tier strategy. Now, there are some major risks that come with making a meta call, and of course the bigger the meta call you make, the bigger the risk that comes with it. When I say a bigger meta call, I mean including more cards that focus on taking down that strategy into your deck, or including cards that are more specific to taking down that strategy as opposed to more general. One of the risks that you run by having a large meta call in your deck is making your deck less consistent. When you focus your deck more on a side strategy that takes down your opponent's strategies, you are less likely to draw into the cards that advance your own strategies. This is especially true when you're running very combo-based decks that require you to have multiple combo pieces in your hand. You are more likely to draw dead if you cannot get those combo pieces because you are because your deck focuses too much on taking down that top tier dominant strategy. The other and kind of the obvious risk of running a major meta call in your deck is that you could possibly face against a deck that isn't meta, in which case you are probably going to lose. Anti-meta strategies lose to non-meta strategies. This is a fairly self-explanatory thing, because if you think about it, when you are focusing your deck on being able to take down a particular dominant strategy, if you're playing against a deck that doesn't use that strategy, they're not going to lose to your meta call. So that's one of the really big risks of running a meta call. Now, who in their right mind would do something that risky? Well, somebody who's actually considered the benefits of a meta call may consider taking that risk. Now, some of the benefits of the meta call include having a stronger game one. Now, game one is really important because if you win game one, then your opponent has to draw into their outs 2 games in a row, as opposed to you, who only have to draw into your outs for 1 game. You only have to beat them for 1 game. You have a side decking advantage, so if you want to go into your side deck, then you can make modifications in the game 3 if you lose game 2. So game 1 is really big, and you have a huge advantage over your opponent in the game 1 if you are making a strong meta call. The other big advantage of making a meta call is that you do not necessarily have to use up that same space in your side deck. Now, usually when you run a meta call in your deck, it's using cards that you might normally have in your side deck. So if you're actually running those cards in your main deck, it frees up your side deck to include cards that are maybe even better against that strategy, ones that you can bring in to specifically take down that deck if you really know that you're going to be facing that matchup a lot, or you can diversify your side deck to be able to take down a wider number of strategies than your main deck does. So those are some of the advantages of making a meta call in your deck. Now, what are some tips that I can give you to make your meta calls the most effective? The very first tip I can give you is the faster the format, the bigger the meta calls that you should make. This is true for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that in a faster format, speed trumps advantage. If your deck can operate more quickly than your opponent's deck in a faster format, that's how you win, not necessarily by gaining that 1-by-1 kind of card advantage that you have in a slower format, like the +1 Fire Fist format. So in a faster format, a single card slowing down your opponent is much more effective than a single card slowing down your opponent in a slower format. But the other thing is, when we are in faster formats, we tend to play fewer cards in our deck that are kind of standard outs for strategies that take us down. A great example is during the Dragon Ruler format, people stopped maining MSTs. In a faster format like this one, people are less likely to run outs for the strategy that you are using to take down theirs. Another tip is make your strategies as general as possible. When you're making a meta call, you want it to take down as many of the matchups that you're going to face in a day as possible. So if you're in a tier 0 format, then it makes more sense to have a more specific strategy, because the vast majority of matchups that you're going to have in a competitive tournament are going to be against that single deck. But if you're in like a format like the Dragon Ruler Spellbook format, where you're going to be facing against 2 dominant decks most of the day and you're not sure which one you're going to be facing more of, it's wiser to run a card that could potentially be used against both of those strategies, but you can tilt it a little more toward the deck that you think that you are going to see more of. Another strategy is run the kind of meta call that your opponent is not necessarily going to main deck outs for. For instance, it is a bad idea to run a continuous spell or trap that takes down artifacts, because artifacts are just going to use one of their multitude of MST substitutes to take down that card, and it isn't going to be of much use to you. However, in the faster formats, we stop using Dark Hole, we stop using Book of Moon, which means a card like Fossil Dynapachycephalo is a better meta call, because an artifact deck is actually less likely to be maining outs to that card, such as Book of Moon or Dark Hole. And the final tip that I have for you guys is make it hurt. If you pitch a MMA fighter versus a boxer, that boxer better have one hell of a punch, because if they're not knocking teeth out, then they're in trouble, because that punch is the best thing that they have. It's the only thing that they have, versus the MMA fighter who has a multitude of options for their disposal. And the same goes for a meta call. If you're going to make a meta call, you can't let it be wussy, because if you're going to focus your deck on taking down that dominant strategy, if it doesn't work, you are in serious trouble. So those are my tips for making most effective meta calls. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. If you like what you're seeing here, please do subscribe to my channel. It is the RJB0. Y'all can check it out and see if you like what you see. Thank you guys for watching. I'm the RJB0. I got a jet.